I'm super excited, you guys, to welcome Shanita to this SOS chat. She is the founder of Good Love for Moms, and she's going to be telling you guys all about that. So, thank you for coming on. And
Of
we are
course. Thank
so
you for
ready.
having me.
Yes. So, Shanita, tell us who you are and what you do, and let us know also where we can find you.
Yes, so I'm Shanita. I started Good Love for Moms. Um, I use my platform to encourage mothers, new mothers, mothers that have been in it for a while to prioritize their self-care.
I'm super excited about this SOS chat. If you guys are not familiar, I'm Jay Monroe of the Slate League, which is a monthly self care awakening that helps women to overcome imposter syndrome and self sabotage. Also, if you guys did not know, I was just featured in Essence Magazine. Hello, let me blush.
Yes.
Hello, Essence Magazine, page 85. Make sure y'all get your copy. Like, let's go. So I have to do my little Essence shout out. Page 85.
Do
Hashtag
that.
page 85. The SOS chats are self care over self sabotage, where we are basically having a conversation around eliminating imposter syndrome, any forms of self sabotage, and pouring more self care into
I
ourselves.
started this back in December of 2020. Mainly because for myself, I had been running myself ragged, okay, and I was hospitalized because I had issues with cysts, and I said, girl, you need to rest.
Right.
So, yes, Good Love for Moms. You can find me at goodlovemoms.com. That's good with an E, love with two E's, moms.com. And on Instagram, I'm Good Love for Moms, Good Love, the number four moms. Yeah, and so I have resources and self care products as well.
And how did the pandemic shift all of that for you in starting that, like in the midst of the pandemic? Because I know I started the Slate League like literally right before the pandemic hit, and it was just like, this is not in my plans right now. Like, what are y'all doing messing up my whole vibe? Like, come on now. So did that
Yes.
disrupt anything for you, or did that change anything for you?
The pandemic for me, so I was right when the pandemic started, I was a new stay-at-home mom. I had never been a woman who didn't work, who didn't make her own money. So it was a big life change and transition for me. Um, and so I had been thinking about starting it, right? And then, self-sabotage happens,
Right.
and
Right.
okay, so this is something that was in the back of my mind for a while, that I needed to start it just to build community and help other moms who may have been dealing with the same things I have been dealing with and didn't have a resource or know where to turn to for help. Um, and so that's where I birthed Good Love for Moms. And the pandemic actually kind of pushed me more into doing this, because during that time, I know I'm not alone. A lot of people were like isolated, and it was like a culture shock for a lot of us. So the pandemic definitely made it push me more to put myself into this.
Oh, that's good. Oh, girl, you're doing good there. Because usually before the pandemic, it's like, okay, they put a stop to things. It was like, hey, Chauncey, it's like put a stop to things. It's like, okay, this is, a little bit of fear comes in. And I know you said self-sabotage tried to play a part in that. What forms of self-sabotage tend to show up for you most?
So for me, I am someone that, like, I doubt myself a lot, and a lot of times people are like, "What, girl? Don't doubt yourself." But I have had issues with myself pushing myself to do things, because I do have self-doubt especially when I'm starting something new. I kind of question, like, my abilities. You get those thoughts in your head, and that sometimes, most of the time, it'll turn into procrastination. And so I'm just like, I'll get to it, I'll get to it, I'll do it, I'll do it, and then, but as I've grown and I've become more self-aware, of when I am doubting myself and I have to snap myself out of it, or I have to do something to pour into myself so I know, like, okay, girl, you got this, you're capable.
Right.
And that's why I feel like self-care is so important, because it's not only pouring into yourself and self-indulgence, but it's the wellness of your mind and how you speak to yourself,
Yes.
and that you project that onto other people as well. So
Oh, yes.
I think those are also very good reasons of why we should practice self-care even more.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree. And I know you said procrastination, which I talk about all the time. Procrastination, the root of procrastination is fear. Point blank period, is fear. So whether it's a fear of what people think, whether it's a fear of if you're going to fail, whether it's a fear of this is not going to turn out how I want it to turn out, or just a fear of the unknown, a lot of the times we let that hold us back. And it's subconscious too. It's not like, you know, people are sitting around like, yeah, I'm just going to procrastinate today. It's usually like a subconscious thought. And that thought leads you to like, okay, let me just do something else. Let me do some busy work. Let me do this. Well, I got to do this, knowing that you have something at the top of your list, at the top of your head, like you should be doing, but you're doing everything else instead.
But
so that I totally understand. For me, right before the pandemic, I had planned the Slay League and just was working on all kinds of content. And I was like, imposter syndrome really tried to creep in. Like, girl, who is going to join your membership in the middle of a pandemic? And I was like, we're not doing that. Like, hold on. So I was just like, no, I'm going to push forward anyway. And there's people who still need what I have to offer. There are people who still need, you know, the tools to overcome self-sabotage and imposter syndrome. So just like I like push through it, like, okay. And people were joining. So it's like that procrastination and that fear, once you get over it, it's like, what was I even doing that for? Like,
exactly.
Everything is fine. So it's just like we stop ourselves and we prevent ourselves from getting to our goal. A lot of the times I feel like too early, we kind of just like make excuses early on. And it's like, we don't even know what the outcome is going to be yet. We don't even know how successful this can be yet. We don't give ourselves that chance to do that. So I 100% agree with you. And I want to ask you too, how has imposter syndrome impacted you as a mom and as an entrepreneur?
I think that motherhood has actually fueled me to go after things outside of my 9 to 5, outside of motherhood, because not only do I want to show my daughter that, hey, you can do anything you want to do, for one, but two, I go to bed better at night when I know I've done the things that make me feel good, right? So that pursuing different things in life, that's what makes me feel good. And I become more self-aware and notice that I'm happier when I'm doing X, Y, and Z. I'm happier when I'm doing things that make me feel good about myself. So imposter syndrome, in the beginning, when I first started my journey into motherhood, I doubted myself a lot and my abilities. And I think that maybe it came from me not really having a vision of what it was going to look like, and then kind of falling into it like, oh my gosh, this is it, like I'm here. So motherhood has definitely pushed me more into being more confident in this. Yes.
And how are you learning to like balance that, like experiencing like imposter syndrome in like as an entrepreneur, and then like do you experience it at any points like as a mom? I know we had another mom on the SOS chat, Yolanda, and she was saying that she noticed when she started her business, I think for her it was the opposite. When she started her business, she noticed that the imposter syndrome that she felt, the feelings of imposter syndrome that kicked in for her, she noticed also showed up in other areas of her life, such as being a mom. And so that was one of the things I was really interested in hearing is like, how do you find that balance when you're experiencing imposter syndrome in different areas of your life?
For me, it's more so about letting go of those things that I don't have control over, and
Yes.
then honing in on the things that I can control.
Yes.
And so, like, I'm also someone that battles anxiety. And
Mm.
so I know that if I can't control how, I can't control if my daughter is going to come in the house at 5 minutes in 5 minutes and only wants mommy, and I'm still doing this, well, I don't have control over how she's going to react, but I can control how I handle that situation, right?
Right.
So for me, finding the balance is about letting go of all those things that I have no control over, and
Hmm.
focusing on the things that I can control.
That's a good thing. Because a lot of times, one of the things I do pride myself on, and I applaud you for that, is like, if I cannot control it, it is out of my hands. I'm not going to stress myself. If I can't figure it out, God can. So I'm not even going to be like, girl, what are we doing? Like, God got to figure it out. Don't ask me
Right.
how. Don't ask me when. Don't ask me where. I don't know, but I know somebody who do. So I'm like, if it's something I can't control, it's just like, why put that extra stress on yourself? Why put that extra pressure on yourself? And that's what I talk about a lot of the times too inside the Slay League, is taking some of that pressure off yourself. We put so much pressure on ourselves for perfection, to do things right, just to have everything in order, to know the next steps. And sometimes it's okay not to know the next steps. Sometimes it's okay for it not to be perfect. Like, the imperfections build that character. The imperfections, build, the what is it, the fullness of the authenticity of what it is. So if it were to be so perfect, there would be no authenticity. And so that's a lot of the times too, is taking some of that authenticity and really just reflecting that, like, there's so many things and so many influences that can cause you to divert to your something that's not your true self. And a lot of the times, getting back to that and pouring that self-care into yourself is so, so, so important. So
Comparison. So,
yes,
falling into that comparison trap.
yes,
And I do this a lot, like in motherhood too. Um, we're not all going to parent the same way. We're not all going to
right,
mother the same way.
right.
And you have to, when you get in those modes of comparing yourself to other people,
Mm-hmm.
or the way where someone is to where you are, we are all on our own path.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I can't be where person A is because I'm not person A, I'm person B,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And
Yes,
you have to be secure in the fact that you are who you are, and you are who you are for a reason. And if I'm here to tell my story to help someone else, I'm going to do that because my story is different than the next person's story, and my
exactly.
testimony is going to be different than the next person's testimony. And that's important.
Yes, absolutely. I absolutely agree. Comparison, a lot of the times, I'm telling y'all, like, slay in your lane. Like, if you are in your lane and you're focused on what you're doing, you do not have time to compare yourself to what the next person is doing. If you have time, like I said in the last SOS chat, if you have time to compare yourself, you're not focused enough on what you're doing, because you shouldn't even have time to look to the left and look to the right. Like, okay, what is everybody else doing? What is this person doing? What are you doing? That's what you need to be focused
Exactly.
on. And when you focus on what you're doing versus what everybody else is doing, there is no standard that you have to measure up to. Like, you create your own standard. So if you're creating your own standard, it's like you can't fail. Like, you're only trying to go above that standard that you're creating versus trying to top somebody else or compete or compare with somebody else. And you have no idea what they've been through, where, they got their help from, if they're getting help, the things that they had to do to get to where they're at. So it's just like, you really can't compare, like you said, your journey, and just, you have a totally different testimony and a totally different even a totally different audience and people that you're serving. So you're not even serving the same people. So to compare yourself to people who are serving a completely different audience for something completely different, for something completely different, it's like, that's insanity. Like, what are you doing?
Yes,
Like, you
it's
have no business doing it.
a waste of your time,
It
okay?
is
Do
an
not
absolute
waste your
waste of your
time
time.
comparing yourself to people. And I say this too about practicing self-care. Like, self-care for me is not going to look the same as it looks for the next person. So
Yeah.
we have to find out that's where the work comes in, right? We have to find
Hmm.
out what we need for ourselves
Yes.
so that we can properly practice self-care, because self-care for somebody else is not going to look the same that it looks for me.
Yes.
And if I go trying to practice self-care like this next person, it's not going to work. It's not going
No.
to do what it's supposed to
Right.
do.
Right. It's like everybody is very different, and just because you see one thing works for somebody else, like I said, it may work for you, but the best thing to do is find what works for you instead of trying to imitate what you see working for everybody else. It's going to look different from day to day. Even just like your experiences and your life and the things that you go through, it's not going to be on schedule with what the next person is doing. So to try to implement the same self-care strategies and the tools that they're using, it's like, no, you have to, create that on your own so that it fits and that it works for you. You, again, when you slay your lane, there is no competition. So
Yes, and
that
you
falls
have to
in
be
line.
intentional about
Yes,
staying in your lane.
exactly. That transfers into, like you said, doing the work. Like, what does doing the work look like? What does that actually look like for you to get to the person that you were created to be? What does the self care strategy look like? And people don't think you need a self care strategy. Like, it's just, okay, I'm just going to buy myself something nice, next month, or I'm going to go out to dinner this month or something like. No, you need a self care strategy. Self care should be every day and not just on Sundays. I know we like to do self care Sundays. You guys do not have to wait one day out the week to take care of yourselves. Like,
Absolutely.
absolutely
I
not.
would
So,
like, what advice would you give to someone that's just beginning their self-care journey? Because I get questions a lot where people are like, "Well, I don't know how to practice self-care. Like, what do I do?" It's not just bubble baths and a glass of wine, you know. It, like we said before, it's work. So, what advice would you have someone that's in the beginning of their self-care journey?
ooh, that is a great question. I absolutely love it. I would say the first thing is identifying where you need to pour self care into yourself, where you're falling short, or where you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed. Where, when you start procrastinating, someone asks, how do you overcome procrastination? Procrastination is an avoidance tactic and a fear based response that we use. So once you figure out what that avoidance is, what is it that you're really avoiding? What is it that is making you feel anxiety? What is making you feel stressed? What is causing those feelings? So getting to the root of that, you really have to be intentional and you really have to be honest with yourself, because if you're trying to get to the root of something and you're saying there's nothing wrong, there's no wound there, you can't heal a wound by saying it's not there. So the fact that you have those feelings means that it's something there. So I would say starting by getting to the root of your avoidance or the feelings that you have, even feelings of imposter syndrome or self sabotage, getting to the root of that is going to help you figure out where you need to apply more self care into your life. And it's like, okay, if you fall, say for instance, you fall, just using this analogy, it's like, okay, you're hurt, but where are you hurt? Did you scrape your knee? Did you scrape your elbow? Like, where is it hurting? So once you can identify that wound, then you can then go and say, okay, let me unpack this. And a lot of the times we skip that step and it's just straight to self-care. And it's like, oh,
Hmm.
bubble baths and all this stuff. And it's like, after that bubble bath, you're still going to be stressed because you still haven't identified the root cause of this issue. So identifying the root cause of the issue will start you off to a self-care strategy. And then once you have that, you need to figure out the tools that you're going to use. You need to have an actual plan. So it's like, okay, yes, this is the root of that. I'm feeling this, or I notice that I feel this way when this happens. So figuring out what that X is, what that Y is, and what that Z is. Figuring out the equation of like, okay, when this happens, I feel this way. In order for me not to feel this way, I need to do this. Does that look like forgiving somebody? Does that look like forgiving yourself? Does that look like doing more work? Does that look like resting, doing less work? Figuring out what that is a great start to implementing a self-care strategy, I would say.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Thank you. And it's like a lot of the times we're just so I don't want to say wrapped up, but so comfortable. We get very comfortable in just how our experiences have shaped us to be. So it's like we fall into the pattern of comfort versus, okay, this is not the life that I want to live. This is not how I want to, my future to be. This is not the person that I want to become. So in order to change those things, you have to start digging into it and not avoid it, not, act like it's not there. Like you feel those feelings because you need to implement more self-care. And just figuring out, like we talked about, what that self-care actually looks like is going to be different. It's going to be very different from person to person. So figuring out what is it that you need and figuring out that what works for you. And that's not to say you can't ask people or see other people and say, oh, I love that self-care strategy that you're using. I want to implement that for myself. Not to say you can't do that, but really figure out, because your problems are going to be different from the next person's problems. So you won't know that until you actually start getting to the bottom of what the root of the problem is.
Exactly. And like I like to say, like, if nothing changes, then nothing changes. So you have to be intentional about making those changes when you do figure out, where you need to make those, where and why you need to make those changes. And for me, like I said before, I was burnt out, right? So I said, okay, something's got to change. I got to find ways to, one, spend more time with myself, and two, implement rest more, right? So it's very important to be ready to make those changes.
And one of the things you said too that I really want to touch on is mindfulness. Is like you were mindful of what needed to change. And it takes intentionality for any type of change. And for intentionality, you have to be mindful. Like you're not going to know what the problem is unless you're mindful of your actions, you're mindful of your thoughts, you're mindful of your behaviors, how they affect you, your body, how they affect, other people, the environment that you're in. If you are not mindful, you're not picking up social clues like, hey girl, something is wrong, like you're not going to be able to fix the problem. So being mindful, I love that you are being mindful in that, because that's one of the things that's going to help you grow and help you to have a better self-care strategy and implement, more things that are going to help build you up versus overwhelm you and tear you down, and just like things you don't need and just stressing yourself out for no reason. Go at your pace. Yes, Yolanda said go at your own pace. Yes, you have to go at your own pace, because otherwise you're either going to be going too slow and you're going to be left behind. And that's not even in a way of left behind compared to anybody else. You're going to be left behind from where you're supposed to be in your journey. It's like you're supposed to be up here and you're still down here. It's like you have to go at your own pace. And then something I said too, I think on Twitter, it was like, you're consistent does not have to look like everybody else is consistent. So in the same token, like going at your own pace does not mean that if you see the person next to you doing 65, you got to speed up and do 65. If 35 is working for you, if that's the pace that's working for you, stay at that pace. Because what's going to happen is you're going to try to do 65 all the way and you're going to burn yourself out. So I love, Yolanda, that you said go at your own pace. It's like that's something that we have to be very intentional about. And with this SOS chat that I created, I wanted it to be a conversation that sparks intentionality. Something that sparks and says, you know what? I do need to pour more self-care into myself. I do need to be more mindful of the ways that I'm self-sabotaging, or the feelings of imposter syndrome that come in and how they're affecting me, how they're affecting my life, how they're affecting the people around me, and is this what I want? If you aren't intentional, it's like, what is the purpose? It's like, go hard or go home. If you're going to do it right, or don't do it at all. And self-care, you can't half-ass self-care.
Absolutely not.
For, like you can't half-ass self-care and expect to be like 10 out of 10. They're going to be like, no, your body's going to shut down. Like your mind is going to be on overload. It's not going to work. What is one of your favorite self-care strategies?
Rest. So no, not even joking. Like, y'all know babies are a lot of work. And so prior to motherhood, I didn't really think much about self-care, you know. I was
Mm-hmm.
my own, you know, my own person. I rest when I want to. I'll
Mm-hmm.
stay up all night if I want to, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But after I had my daughter, I realized that if I don't rest, I'm no good to anybody. I'm not
Yes.
even any good to myself.
Yes.
And so when you're burnt out to the point to where you have nothing to give, where I couldn't even pour into myself, then how can I show up for my 9 to 5? How can I show up
Yes.
for my business? How can I show up for my husband? Like, how
Yes.
can I do those things if I'm not resting? And
Mm-hmm.
so I tend to, it's important for me to one, spend time with myself and only myself.
Yes.
So I can, you know, I journal so I can get my thoughts out. I talk to
Mm-hmm.
God, you know, those things are important for my self-care. So
Yes.
that's how I pour into myself is I take time to myself and and I get adequate rest.
Yes.
So, and like with children, their schedules change, like they go through different phases. So I've had to adjust my schedule several times to ensure that one, I'm getting adequate rest that I need.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also to make sure that my daughter's good. She's on a schedule that works well for her, but I also have to be on a schedule that works well for me.
Right. So it's about finding that balance at any given
Yes.
moment that could change and
Hmm.
being adaptable. I guess you would probably say it's being
Yep.
adaptable to that change. And I love that you said rest because a lot of the times we feel like we have to deserve rest or I haven't worked hard enough to rest. You know, like how your parents used to tell you, like you come in tired. It's like, you ain't got no job. What you tired for? Like, what you mean? I'm
Like,
still
it's okay to be tired.
tired.
It is okay to be tired.
It's okay. So it's
Rest
just like
is productive,
that.
okay?
Woo, I love that. Yes.
And we live in a world where, and I think the pandemic is kind of shifting it a little bit, but we've lived in this world where we've been made to feel like rest is not a productive thing, but
Yes.
getting your body needs it, right? Like
Yes.
we need it to function, we need it to live.
Right.
So never ever feel bad or anything about getting the adequate rest that you need. And even if
Mm-hmm.
that's laying, just, you don't even have to be sleep, but like resting your mind,
Yes.
turning your mind off,
Yes.
letting your body just be, you know. We don't always have to be doing something. Like,
Yes.
it is okay to sit down and literally do nothing and think about nothing and just give your body time to quiet and rest and recharge. Like, that's so important.
I absolutely agree. And something that you just said reminded me a lot of the times we feel like we have to always be doing something. That's another fear based response. It's a fear based response of avoidance. So it's like if you can't be still long enough to sit with your own thoughts, to sit through and just process things, that's a problem. That's a clear sign that you should probably implement a self care strategy. You should probably get to the root of your busyness because it's not productive. Busyness does not equate to productivity. So you can be busy all day and then you're doing things to avoid these feelings, to avoid addressing what the real issue is. And it's like people do this all throughout their lives without stopping to figure out what are the feelings that I'm avoiding? What are the feelings that are, coming into my mind that are creating feelings of self doubt, that are creating feelings of imposter syndrome, that are creating feelings of self sabotage. And then those thoughts create actions. So then your behaviors are not in line with who it is you say you want to be because you can't even sit down to process your thoughts, your emotions, and your feelings. So busyness is not a great thing. I know because society makes us feel like if you're not busy all the time, you're lazy. Is like just such a great thing to be busy. It's not a great thing to be busy. Like, I
Absolutely.
don't want to be booked and busy. I want to be booked and rested. Like,
Yes.
I want to be able to still be booked and rested. I don't have to work myself into exhaustion just to feel like I've accomplished something. So you don't have to earn rest. You don't have to do XYZ. You don't have to check everything off on your to-do list to deserve a break, to deserve rest. If you're not feeling it that day, rest and try again tomorrow. You don't have to, push yourself. Let me just push myself. Yes, sometimes you do want to push yourself, but you don't want to keep pushing yourself into exhaustion. You don't want to push yourself into burnout. You don't want to push yourself into always avoiding the issues at hand because you want to be busy or you want to be productive. So I love the self-care strategy that you have is just spending time with yourself. One thing that I implement a self-care strategy for me is when I get up in the morning, the first thing I'm doing is praying, reading my scripture, and not being on social media. A lot of the times we are just so quick to just get up on social media. As soon as we open our eyes, it's like, let me go on Instagram, let me go on Twitter. And what you're doing is you're consuming the thoughts of everybody else before you even get to process your own thoughts. Like you're not even processing your own thoughts before you start consuming thousands of other people's thoughts, their emotions, their opinions, their lives. And that is an influence on your mindset. Comparison is kicking in. You're kicking in comparison before you even start your day.
Yeah.
So it's just like you have to be very intentional. That's something that I'm very intentional about, is starting my day with, like you said, spending time with myself, spending time with my own thoughts, and just not letting those influences create my day and just create the path that I want my day to go on. Because if you do that, you're going to lose pieces of yourself. It's not going to be your authentic self. It's going to be the pieces of people that you pick up every single morning. You pick up your phone and you start scrolling. So if you don't know where to start, that's a good self-care strategy to start, is stop picking up your phone soon as you wake up in the morning and scrolling on Instagram, scrolling on Twitter. Like, take some time to yourself, process your thoughts, pray if that's your thing. If it's not, meditate, whatever you want to do, breathing exercises. I don't care what you do. Long as you take some time to process your own thoughts and really just filter out what everybody else is doing before you start your day, that is going to help you to have a clear mind. It's going to help you to be more focused on what it is that you want to do. And it's going to help you to prevent self-sabotage and feelings of imposter syndrome by way of comparison. And you'd be surprised how much time you're spending on social media. Like, you think you'd be on there for like, an hour, and then you look at that screen time, it'd be like 4 hours. Like, what you been doing all day scrolling? Like, you could have had this, and this done. Everything on your to-do list.
Yes, I rely on those because I work in social media. Like, that's my job. Mm-hmm. Like, I have to have a limit, because otherwise I'm just going to be either scrolling or working when I don't need to be working, right? So exactly. That's where it comes into knowing what self-care strategies you need for yourself.
Mm-hmm. And that's a whole nother self-care strategy in itself, is spending time on social media. How much time are you spending on social media? And then also, I just shared on the Slay League today on Twitter, the things that you consume. So what is it that you're reading? What is it that you're watching? What is it that you're listening to? Who are you getting advice from? Who are you following? What are you following? All those things play a big influence on your thoughts. And the thoughts, again, drive your actions. And so once you start putting all these things into your mind, your actions and your thoughts are going to divert from what it is that you say you want if you're not intentional about what you consume. So what you consume is a big part of your self-care strategy. And you really just have to be mindful of, is this serving the person that I want to be? Not, is this serving me now? Because of course you're going to say, yeah, this is serving me. I enjoy the content. I enjoy following this person. I enjoy this. No, is it serving the person that you want to become, the person that you say you want to become, and the things that you say you want to do? Is that beneficial, and is that adding to what it is that you say you want to do? If it's not, it has to go. Start unfollowing people. Start unfollowing content that does not align with who it is you say you want to be. Not where you are now, because if you keep waiting, you're going to be waiting for the rest of your life. Go ahead and figure out, who is it that I want to become, and does this align with that? And if it doesn't, you have to get rid of it. That goes with friends, that goes with family, I don't care who it is. It goes with your job, it goes with your habits. Anything that does not align with the person that you want to become, get rid of it. It has to go.
I always say you have to pay close attention into how you feel after you've either consumed, after you've consumed the content, after you've interacted with that person, or after whatever you're experiencing. You have to pay attention to how you feel after you've done that. And if it don't feel good, then it has to go.
That is a very good indicator. of the things that need to go, how does it make you feel? I'm so glad you mentioned that. How does it make you feel after that interaction? That goes for people too. Like if you around somebody and every time you get around that person, you just like in a bad mood, you just doubting yourself, you over here just thinking of every possible bad thing that could go wrong. It's like you should probably reevaluate that.
Mm-hmm.
You should probably start reevaluating who you're around, what type of feelings that you have when you're around these people, because sometimes we feel like we have feelings of imposter syndrome, and really it's the environment that we're in. So that could be friendships, that could be even your job. So if you have a job and you're trying your best, you're doing the best that you can, you know you're skilled at what you do, and then it's still not good enough for somebody who is over you or the people around you, you're going to start feeling like, okay, is this good enough? When in reality, you know it's good enough. But it's your environment that causes those feelings of imposter syndrome. So that's another thing too, is to ask yourself, what is causing my feelings of imposter syndrome? Is it my environment? Is it my job? Is it the people that are around me? Do I not have enough support around me? Do I not have people encouraging me and pushing me on the things that I want to do? So that's something to consider as well. And definitely, like, once you notice those things, again, going to be mindful and back to being intentional, it's like, what are you going to do about it? A lot of the times we know we procrastinate. We know we experience perfectionism. We know we self-doubt, negative talk. We know all of that. But we sit on it and it's like, okay, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to stay stuck in that same place? Or are you going to be intentional to take the necessary steps to implement a self-care strategy or to change that? And then again, if you can't change it, change your attitude about it. If you can't change it, okay, what is this teaching me right now? What do I need to learn from this in this process at this very moment? And what can I focus on instead versus focusing on the things that I can't change? And something that I shared in this week's newsletter for the Slay League is that we hear all the time, everything you want is on the other side of fear. And I am a strong believer that what you focus on is what you create, what you manifest. So if everything if you hear that and you take that in, everything that you want is on the other side of fear, what are you going to focus on? You're going to focus on fear. You're going to focus on the fear that you have to get past, and it's going to seem insurmountable. And it's going to be like, I can't get past this. You're going to be paralyzed because you're focusing on the fear. So I say everything that you want is on the other side of unlearning. So when you focus on unlearning the thoughts that you've been conditioned to think, the patterns that you've been used to and comfortable doing, the behaviors that you're comfortable in, you have been using those strategies, those survival strategies when you should be thriving, then it's like, okay, we can begin to change that process. You can begin to become a better version of yourself when you're very intentional about that. So think of it as unlearning versus you have to get past a fear. And self-sabotage, like I say all the time, is a learned behavior. So that means it can be unlearned. And a lot of the times it's just unlearning all of those things to get to the core version of who we are and what we need to do.
Yes, and taking like you can just take small steps. You don't have to do big, huge changes. You can take small steps. If that's like you said, implementing your prayers in the morning, implementing not getting on social media first thing in the morning. Just take small steps and then take the baby steps and then grow into who you're supposed to be that way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then if you could describe self-care in one word, what would it be and why?
I would say it's necessary. It's a necessity. You need it for survival. If you're not pouring into yourself, if you're not taking care of yourself, then what are you doing?
Yes.
Because you're either going to end up burnt out,
Mm-hmm.
you're either going to end up disappointed,
Mm-hmm.
you're either going to end up with regrets. And so self-care is a necessity. It's you need it for survival.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I think a lot of the times we look at self-care as this luxury, as this thing of something we do every once in a while, or I'm going to have a spa day, for my birthday, or I'm going to do this you know, we do something nice for ourselves. But like you said, it's a necessity. Like you need to think of self-care as much as you think of breathing. Like it needs to become so second nature to you that you don't even question or you don't even doubt pouring into yourself and finding some type of way to care for yourself and pour back into yourself so that you can pour into the things that you want to and that you need to into those things. But you can't pour into anything if you're not pouring into yourself first. I have so enjoyed this chat with you, Shanita. This has been a really great conversation, and
Thank
even
you.
just from your perspective of being a mom, it's like you can take some of those self-care strategies and still implement that and into other areas of your life. So thank you. I absolutely love everything that you have said and all the gems that you have dropped for us. And I so appreciate you for being on here.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it to the fullest.
Yes.
Thank you.